on your head, now.
A man named Bradley had been sentenced to time in a high-security prison. The cell he was locked in was filthy. The previous inmate had defecated there and left it that way. The stench was unbearable, but Bradley was willing to endure anything for the sake of his family. He quietly took off his undershirt, wrapped it around his nose, and started thinking about his past. Bradley had always been an honest man. He worked as a car mechanic and lived a simple, happy life with his wife, Lauren. One day, like every other day, Bradley drove to the garage with a car that needed fixing. The garage owner, who seemed to be waiting for him impatiently, called Bradley into his office. The moment he was called, Bradley sensed what was about to happen. He was going to be fired. And that's exactly what happened. The owner told him the garage was going through financial trouble and that he had to let some workers go. But Bradley knew that was just an excuse. The real reason was that Bradley was a straightforward, no-nonsense man, and the boss wanted to replace him with someone more obedient and flattering. Bradley quietly went back to his locker, gathered his things, and drove home. He didn't want to argue with his boss, the same man who had once helped him during tough times. Driving home, Bradley felt sad and lost. He had worked at that garage for years. It had become like a second home to him, and now he was leaving behind many friends. As he approached his house, he noticed Lauren sitting in her car, talking on the phone, and smiling happily. Something about it didn't feel right. Bradley watched her closely, and suspicion began to grow in his mind. When he saw a mark on her neck, a kiss mark, his doubts turned into rage. He walked up to her car and told her to open the door. Lauren refused to hand over her phone when he asked for it, but Bradley snatched it from her hands. On the phone, he found an unknown number, proof that she'd been talking to another man. Furious, Bradley told her to go inside. Lauren tried to explain, but he didn't want to hear a word. Seeing his anger, she quietly went inside the house. He was already crushed from losing his job, and now this betrayal pushed him over the edge. In blind rage, he smashed her car, hurting his own hands badly in the process. After a while, he calmed down, walked inside, sat on the couch, and finally asked her, "How long has this been going on?" Lauren, with tears in her eyes, confessed that she'd been seeing another man for the past 3 months. A few months earlier, Lauren had gone through an abortion, which left her depressed and emotionally distant. Bradley had been too busy with work to notice her pain. Feeling lonely and empty, she had sought comfort elsewhere. Hearing this, Bradley felt deep regret. He realized he had neglected her when she needed him most. He apologized to her and promised, "From today, we start over a new life together." Lauren agreed. Then Bradley told her the truth, that he had lost his job and had decided to start working for a man named Gil, a local mafia boss. The moment she heard the name, Lauren's face went pale. She reminded him, "You promised you'd never work for Gil." Bradley replied, "I know, but right now, I desperately need money. I don't want to work for him, but I have no choice. We can't survive without money. I'll be careful, I promise." And with that, the story jumps 18 months ahead. Bradley's new job was simple on paper. He had to find a man who supplied goods to all the major mafia dealers. After searching for a while, Bradley finally tracked the man down and delivered the package he was assigned to hand over. Once the job was done, he headed back home. Life had completely changed for Bradley. He was now making serious money. He lived in a big house, drove 2 or 3 luxury cars, and his wife Lauren was just days away from giving birth to their first child. Everything seemed perfect, but as they say, dirty money never brings clean peace. That night, Bradley brought Lauren into the bedroom. They were about to get close when suddenly, Gil's call came through. Gil, the mafia boss Bradley worked for, wanted him at his house immediately. Bradley couldn't say no. He looked at Lauren. Her face said all. She was tired of this life, tired of the fear that came with it. But without another word, Bradley grabbed his keys, got into his car, and drove off. A short drive later, he pulled up at Gil's mansion. Inside, Gil greeted him warmly. They talked business. Gil told Bradley that one of his associates, a man named Eliezer, had a special job that needed to be done. Eliezer, who had deep connections in Mexico, arrived a little later with 2 of his men, Roman and Pedro. Eliezer explained the mission and told Bradley that Roman and Pedro would accompany him, but Bradley refused. He didn't trust Roman. He could tell right away that the guy was a reckless junkie, someone who'd get them caught because of his stupidity. Eliezer defended his men, insisting they were his best guys, but Bradley stood firm. That's when Gil took Bradley aside. He calmly told him that this job could mean big money for everyone, and promised Bradley a 3-month leave once his baby was born. After thinking it through, Bradley finally agreed, on one condition. He would lead the job and Roman and Pedro would follow his orders without question. Eliezer accepted. To test Roman's loyalty, Bradley looked him straight in the eye and asked, "If I tell you to throw the goods away, what would you do?" Roman replied, "I'll throw it." Bradley nodded. The deal was made. That night, the three of them drove down to a remote harbor. Before boarding the ship, Roman started acting on his own, ignoring orders. Bradley was about to lose his temper when Pedro stepped in and said, "Roman, we made a deal. We follow Bradley's lead." Roman reluctantly agreed. Bradley took control of the boat and guided it through the dark waters until they reached the drop point. He scanned the area carefully before stopping the engine. Pedro suited up in his diving gear, slipped into the water, and moments later came back up with a metal crate. Guess what was inside? Not weapons, not drugs, $3 million worth of contraband. They quickly unloaded the goods and dumped the empty crate back into the sea. On their way back to the harbor, Bradley suddenly threw his own package into the water and ordered Roman and Pedro to do the same. But Roman and Pedro ignored Bradley's warning. That didn't sit well with him. Bradley knew that if those two didn't listen, they were all headed for serious trouble. He tried to reason with them, but instead, they turned on him, beating him brutally before walking away. Bradley managed to control his anger and let them go, then slowly made his way back toward the boat. Moments later, just as Roman and Pedro were moving ahead, police sirens blared and officers suddenly surrounded them from both sides. Gunfire erupted, echoing across the docks. Bradley didn't want to get caught. He hid behind a container, thinking fast. Then he heard the cops shouting for help. Some of them were wounded. A plan formed in his mind. He'd pretend to be a bystander helping the police, so they wouldn't suspect him. He moved quietly through the chaos, picked up a gun, and from behind, shot Pedro first, then Roman. But his plan backfired. The police caught him anyway. He was taken in for interrogation. Detective Watkins led the questioning, asking him about the goods, what he was doing at the docks, and who he was working for. Bradley tried to mislead him, playing innocent. But Watkins wasn't fooled. He knew Bradley was a clever man. Though he had no solid evidence to pin him down for smuggling, Bradley had killed 2 men, and that was enough to ruin him. Before his court hearing, Bradley was given one final meeting with his wife. He told Lauren to take care of herself and their unborn child. He'd earned enough illegal money to make sure they could live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Then, the verdict came. Bradley was sentenced to 7 years in prison for murder and illegal possession of firearms. He was transferred to a maximum security facility called Franklin Airgens Prison. Upon arrival, guards ordered him to remove everything of value, even his wedding ring. Then came a medical examination, followed by a cell assignment. He was placed in an upper-level cell with an old inmate named Lefty. There, Bradley met the prison officer, Andre, who explained the rules, the most important one being that whenever the bell rings, he must immediately step out of his cell for roll call. Bradley nodded. Soon after, he was locked in. Sitting alone in that filthy cell, he began to hate himself for ever getting involved with Eliezer, for ruining his life and his family's future. Eventually, he drifted into deep sleep. When roll call time came, every inmate stepped out except Bradley. He was still fast asleep. Because of him, the entire block missed breakfast. When he finally came out, Andre was furious. "I told you the rules, didn't I?" he shouted. He gave Bradley a final warning. Next time, there would be no mercy. Bradley had to follow the rules and maintain discipline. The scene then shifts to Lauren. She's asleep in their house when suddenly she feels something's wrong. Someone's broken in. Lauren rushes to her dresser, grabs a gun, ready to defend herself. But before she can act, she's hit with a taser. Her body jolts, and she collapses to the floor, unconscious. The story cuts back to Bradley. Lefty tells him someone has come to visit. Bradley walks to the visitor area and meets a woman, Dr. Denise. She tells him she got a call from Dr. Placid, who happens to be Lauren's doctor. Denise explains that Dr. Placid said Lauren's pregnancy has developed serious complications, and he wants to meet Bradley at 10 a.m. The next morning, Bradley is stunned. Lauren had never mentioned any doctor named Placid before. The next day, Bradley finally met Dr. Placid, but the moment he saw him, Bradley realized he'd never met this man before, and that's because Placid wasn't a doctor at all. He was Eliezer's man, pretending to be one. With a cold smile, Dr. Placid told him that because of the failed shipment, Eliezer had lost $3 million. Then he showed Bradley a photo of Lauren, tied up and terrified. She had been kidnapped. Placid continued, "Eliezer is furious. He's going to kill your wife and your unborn child. Unless, of course, you do something for him." A deal was made. Bradley was told he had to kill a man, a prisoner serving life sentence in Redcliffe Prison, Block 99. The man's name was Christopher. Placid made it clear, if you go to Redcliffe and kill Christopher, Eliezer will forgive you. Your wife and child will go free. Bradley was devastated. He didn't know what to do, but deep down, he knew he had no choice. Later, as Andre was escorting him back to his cell, Bradley suddenly took off his shoe and attacked him, beating him viciously. He was doing it on purpose. He needed to be transferred to Redcliffe Prison. Andre, furious, struck back with his baton, but Bradley overpowered him, breaking his arm before the guards rushed in. The alarms went off. Guards swarmed the area, tackled Bradley, handcuffed him, and dragged him to an underground cell. But Bradley wasn't done yet. He needed to make sure the system saw him as dangerous enough to be moved to Redcliffe. So he started another brutal fight with 3 guards, knocking each of them down. Seeing his uncontrollable rage, one of the officers finally fired a taser, jolting him to the ground. That was exactly what Bradley wanted. A few days later, the order came through. He was to be transferred to Redcliffe Prison, classified as a high-risk inmate. When Bradley arrived at Redcliffe, he met the sadistic warden, Tuggs, and his 4 guards. Tuggs smirked and said, "You've made the biggest mistake of your life coming here, Bradley. This place doesn't rehabilitate, it destroys." Redcliffe was a fortress, maximum security, zero mercy. Tuggs promised him hellish comfort. After a rough inspection, the guards dragged Bradley not to block 99, but instead to block 59. The moment he stepped into the cell, Bradley was disgusted. It was filthy. The previous inmate had defecated all over the floor. The stench was unbearable. But Bradley was willing to endure everything for his family. He quietly took off his undershirt, covered his nose, and lay down on the cold, dirty floor. After some time, a guard knocked on his cell door and told him he had 60 minutes of outdoor time, a chance to breathe fresh air. Outside, Bradley immediately began looking for Christopher. That's when a man approached him, a tall, rough-looking inmate named Derek. Bradley looked at Derek and asked, "Do you know someone named Christopher?" Derek frowned and shook his head. "There's no one named Christopher in Redcliffe Prison," he said firmly. Bradley froze. That couldn't be right. Dr. Placid had been clear. Christopher was supposed to be here. Confused but determined, Bradley decided to approach a group of inmates working out in the yard. Derek quickly stopped him. "Don't go near them," he warned. "They're psychos, every last one of them." But Bradley didn't listen. He walked straight toward them. The moment he did, the group turned hostile, their eyes cold, their fists tightening. Bradley provoked them deliberately, shouting, "Come on then, let's go." The fight broke out instantly. Punches, blood, chaos. But Bradley wasn't fighting for survival. He was fighting on purpose. He wanted to be labeled as a violent, high-risk inmate, so they'd move him to block 99. That was the only way he could find Christopher and save his family. A guard fired a warning shot into the air to stop the brawl. More guards stormed in, trying to restrain Bradley, but he turned on them too, punching, kicking, refusing to go down. When Warden Tuggs finally arrived, he barked an order to his men, "Cover his face," and without another word, they dragged him deep underground to block 99, the dungeon. There, they strapped a remote-controlled electric shield vest around him and threw him into his cell. Broken glass littered the floor. Then, with sadistic pleasure, Tuggs pressed the button, sending violent electric shocks surging through Bradley's body. The scene cuts to Lauren. She's tied up, weak and terrified. Her condition has worsened. We see Dr. Placid taking photos of her like a trophy. Standing beside him is a Korean abortion specialist. It becomes horrifyingly clear they're planning to terminate her pregnancy. The story shifts back to Bradley. He's lying motionless on the floor, beaten and half-conscious from electric torture. When he finally wakes, he starts screaming, "Christopher, where are you? Christopher." A voice echoes from the next cell. A fellow prisoner says, "There's no Christopher in block 99, man." Bradley's eyes widen. What? Before he can process it, guards rush in, drag him out, and shock him again with electric prods. Then one of them smirks and says, "Christopher wants to see you." They lead him to another dark cell, and there, Bradley's entire world collapses. It's not Christopher waiting for him. It's Eliezer and the same psychotic inmates Bradley fought earlier. The truth hits like a hammer. There was never any Christopher. It was all a setup, a cruel trap to bring Bradley to block 99. Eliezer had lost $3 million because of him. He'd been arrested because of him. And to make it worse, Pedro, the man Bradley killed, had been Eliezer's brother-in-law. Now Eliezer wanted revenge. He had bribed the guards to look the other way, to let him torture Bradley in peace. The shocks intensified. "You're finished, Bradley. You and your family, all of you are done." Then they beat him mercilessly, dragged his limp body back to his cell, and locked him inside. Bradley lay there on the cold floor, broken, helpless, and crushed, realizing that every move he'd made to save his family had only brought them closer to death. Bradley didn't know what to do anymore. He had no idea how to save his family. Desperate, he started talking to the inmate in the next cell, and during their conversation, he came up with an idea. He removed the sole from his shoe and placed it over the sensor on his electric shield. It worked. The shock stopped. A while later, the guards returned and took him into the corridor to check if he was okay. When they told him to go back to his cell, Bradley stalled. "Just give me a minute," he said. "I need some fresh air." When the guards refused, they triggered the shocks again, but they had no idea the shield had stopped working. Bradley faked the pain, convulsing as if being electrocuted, and then he struck. In a blur, he attacked both guards, killing one instantly. The other froze in horror, whispering, "Jesus, this guy's a demon." Bradley snatched the keys from him, locked him inside the cell, and started moving down the corridor toward Eliezer's cell. There he was met by Eliezer's psychotic thugs, the same ones who had tortured him before. But this time, Bradley was unstoppable. He took them down one by one, breaking bones, smashing faces, leaving bodies on the floor. He He fought like a man who had already lost everything. Finally, he reached Eliezer. He punched Eliezer hard, knocking him to the ground, grabbed his phone and growled, "Call your men. Tell them to stop the abortion. Right now." Eliezer refused, so Bradley snapped his right leg. Screaming in agony, Eliezer finally gave in. He made the call. The abortion was stopped. Bradley then ordered him to send Lauren safely to Gil, the only person he still trusted. Dragging Eliezer back to his cell, Bradley threw him inside, along with the terrified guard, and locked the door. Just as he was about to shut it, Warden Tuggs and his men arrived. Tuggs demanded, "Where are my guards?" Bradley answered calmly, "One's dead, the other's still alive. If you open this door, he won't be." He was stalling, waiting for Gil's call, the one that would tell him his wife was safe. Meanwhile, following Eliezer's orders, Dr. Placid and the Korean doctor took Lauren to Gil's place. Dr. Placid kept a gun aimed at Gil, warning him not to try anything stupid. But as soon as they stepped outside, Gil pulled out a sniper rifle, aimed, and blew a hole through Placid's head. Lauren grabbed the rifle from him and shot the Korean doctor, the same monster who was going to abort her child. Back in prison, Bradley's phone finally rang. It was Gil. "She's safe," he said. "Lauren's with me now. I'll take care of her." Then Gil handed the phone to Lauren. Bradley's voice trembled. "Take care of yourself and our baby. When he grows up, tell him to be good, to stay healthy, to be smart, and to live a good life." He knew it was goodbye. He'd never see his family again. Outside the cell, Warden Tuggs snapped impatiently, "You done crying yet?" Bradley looked at him and said quietly, "Just give me one more minute." He turned back toward Eliezer and unleashed every last ounce of rage he had left. He beat him mercilessly, blow after blow, until finally, with one savage strike, Eliezer's head separated from his body. That was the end. Warden Tuggs couldn't take it anymore. He stormed in, raised his gun, and shot Bradley in the head. Bradley collapsed to the ground, still, silent, and free at last. And just like that, the story came to an end.